that are almost beyond comprehension. Hijackers seized control of 4 planes, including 2 that crashed into the World Trade Center.
The Pentagon shares a similar fate as the U.S. vows to hunt down and punish those responsible.
We have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism carried out by fanatics against both civilians and military people, acts that have killed and maimed many innocent and decent citizens of our country.
Thousands may have perished. The search is on for the living. From CNN Center, I'm Jonathan Mann.
And I'm Relitza Vasilova. September 11th, 2001 began like most other Tuesdays in the United States. Millions of Americans awoke, many heading off to work, others perhaps to the airport. But normalcy ended at 8:48 a.m. Eastern Time when this happened. An airliner crashed into the North Tower of New York's World Trade Center. It had been diverted by hijackers. They'd also commandeered 3 other jets, 1 minute after the first, slamming into the Trade Center's South Tower. That was the end of a prominent part of the city's skyline for the past 3 decades. It was also the end of thousands of lives. The next hijacked plane fell from the sky as well, this time devastating a section of the Pentagon, the hub of military operations in the United States. An unknown number killed there. Finally, the 4th aircraft crashed into Pennsylvania's rural Somerset County. As in the case of the other 3 planes, all aboard were killed.
It is being called America's newest day of infamy, a horrible tragedy, a horrendous turning point in history. Our colleague Garrick Utley joins us now from New York. Garrick?
John, there comes a point in a tragedy like this where the initial shock that numbs the body and the mind gives way to the body somehow dealing with it, minds functioning once again and getting to work. And that's what's happening behind us, our position here in Lower Manhattan. The rescue work continues. It is a 24-hour-a-day and night operation. These are some of the latest images from the Trade Center area. We see the heavy equipment that's been moved in, fire hoses still being played on the building, although the fire, as far as we know, is largely out. There's still considerable amounts of dust in the air, and they will continue because of the work itself, which is going on there. Now, we know that when the 2 towers, each more than 100 floors high, collapse, there are thousands of lives, no doubt, lost inside. But to try to give a sense of who was in there, what this rescue operation is going after, here are some of the companies, the tenants in the World Trade Center. Major companies like Morgan Stanley, financial giants, it had 22 floors at the World Trade Center. New York State Blue Shield, Blue Cross had 10 floors. Credit Suisse, First Boston, and one of the major international institutions had a large operation there. Sun Microsystems had at least 2 floors in one of the Trade Center towers. And the Oppenheimer Funds Incorporated was on 4 floors. Hundreds and thousands of employees of these firms trapped there and believed, almost all of them, most certainly, lost. The rescue efforts there are continuing, and there are still the stories coming in, the individual stories of those who were in the building and escaped with their lives. And what we want to present to you right now is some of these eyewitness accounts as they occurred this day and recorded by our CNN camera teams and reporters. Here they are.
I was walking to work about 8:45, going south down Manhattan Island. It looked like a 737 jet. Went straight into the north side of the World Trade Center. Went in, looked like slow motion, and it looked like something out of a movie.
We were watching CNN actually, and they were telling us, you know, that World Trade Center 1 got hit. People were screaming, calm down, nothing is happening here. But at that moment, at exactly that moment, the plane hit us.
Holy shit!
when that second plane hit, a huge fireball in the sky, an explosion that kind of knocked you back. Then you look up in the blue sky and you see all this debris coming and flying. Everybody's running like a riot.
Get out! Get out! Get out!
The tower collapsed, and it was just a big onrush of ash and smoke and people running. It was horrible.
It was complete dark. There is no light. So, thank God somebody with little light came up because we couldn't even see what's happening.
Everybody's bleeding. People laying all over the floor. It's horrible. And I was there the first time, and this is twice.
When the explosion went off and everything went black and my lungs filled up with the debris, I just thought, you know, okay, I might die here.
I was about 5 blocks away. What we did see were people jumping out of the building in suits. It was unbelievable.
I came down here with about 25 police officers. We went inside. We were effecting an evacuation on the second floor. We were helping people out of the building while we still weren't sure exactly what happened. Then we heard stuff coming down. The next thing I know, there was complete darkness. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. The building had come down. And how I got out, I don't know. I'm very blessed. Myself, my CO, and one other officer shouldn't be here, but we got out.
Some of the eyewitness accounts today, and this is a live scene of 8th Avenue in Manhattan, looking down to lower Manhattan, and as you can see, it is empty. You can't drive down there. Nobody is driving, even in the parts of Midtown Manhattan, which are still open to traffic. The city has been dead tonight. Of course, it's a little after 4 a.m., but usually at this time, there's plenty of activity and life in these concrete canyons of Midtown New York City, but not on this evening. People are home, people are sleeping, and one of the things that really shows how a city like this, a city of more than 7 million people, has been affected, is a very simple thing. By 4:10 a.m. in the morning Eastern Time, we'd be having the first editions of the morning newspapers, the New York Times, the Daily News, and the New York Post. We don't have them yet. Why? The reporters and editorial offices are just a few blocks from here. The Daily News is just right over here, 1 block away. But their printing presses several years ago were moved outside of Manhattan, where real estate is cheaper. They're across the Hudson River over there in New Jersey. Some of them are over in Queens in that direction. The tunnels are closed. The bridges are closed. Obviously, they'll get the papers into town at some point. But as of right now, on this Wednesday morning, there are no newspapers in New York, as New Yorkers will soon be waking up. Back to you now in Atlanta.
Thank you, Garrick. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani says the dimension of his city's tragedy will be very large in terms of casualties, the death toll more than likely in the thousands. But he says search and rescue officials will keep going, keep hoping, and keep praying.
The rescue teams are able to get very close now. It was very difficult during the day, but in most places they now can operate. There's still a few dangerous areas, but they're able to operate. They're able to operate down there now.
And joining us now with the latest on the search and rescue efforts in New York is Michael Okwu. Michael, what can you tell us?
Hi, Relitza. Just moments ago, we saw 3 victims transported and brought here into St. Vincent's Hospital. It is unclear, I should say, whether any of those victims sustained injuries having anything to do with the World Trade Center attack. For the most part, it has been very quiet here. We haven't seen any action outside of those 3 victims brought in here moments ago and in more than about 2 to 3 hours now. For the most part, what we've seen here is a handful of medical personnel. We've seen gurneys, and just next to them we have office furniture essentially covered in sheets, all there and set up presumably to transport some of what they hope will be many of the survivors who may still be possibly trapped near the twisted litter and metal and rubble of lower Manhattan, which is just 5 minutes due south of here. St. Vincent's Hospital, as you may know at this point, has become the main triage and trauma center here in New York. Some moments ago, at about 10:30 actually last night, hospital officials told us that 327 patients were admitted here, 50 to 55 of whom were at that time in critical condition. And of course, they have pronounced 3 people dead here on the scene. Earlier today, my colleague Greg Clarkin spoke to one of the doctors here at St. Vincent's.
Well, there's a whole host of injuries, anything you'd see in any other kind of major trauma. Obviously, a lot of broken bones, cuts and bruises, but a lot of blunt trauma, chest trauma, head trauma, things like that. Well, I mean, the longer people are buried, I think the more severe the injury, and there's going to be a lot of smoke and gas inhalation, and people are going to be dealing with that in the next 12 to 24 hours, I believe.
Now, earlier this evening, Governor George Pataki of New York visited the hospital. He said that he visited with many of the victims who were brought here, as well as to the doctors who were trying to perform feats of heroism. He said that their stories were unusual. And on this night in New York, it's very difficult to imagine describing it as anything other than that. Back to you guys.
Michael, thanks very much. All day Tuesday, firefighters struggled to bring a massive blaze under control at the Pentagon after a hijacked plane hit the building at 9:38 a.m. local time. Overnight, the search has been underway for the dead and missing, and last information we have is that the fire itself is still burning. Bob Franken has the latest. Bob?
Well, John, actually smoldering is more like it. They're hoping that they can have it enough under control that at about daybreak they can peel away the wall, the part that was hit by the plane, and start to go through the rubble, looking to see who's inside, looking for casualties, looking for the human cost of this tragedy, which of course hit New York but has also hit the Pentagon, the sign of military strength in the United States. As you can see, people have been around the building now for so many hours. It was about 9:40 yesterday morning that this happened, and all day and all night and throughout the night they have been climbing around the building, dealing with the fire inside, allowing it to burn out, spending so much time. Now, at the very same time, there was still work going on there. There are plans to, in fact, put ships out to sea on both coasts to protect the west coast, where an entire flotilla of ships is going out, including the aircraft carrier Stennis. On the east coast, the Kennedy and other ships have gone out along to protect the east coast of the United States. And in the area of the Middle East, there are ships that are, in fact, were scheduled to come back to the United States, but they're being kept there. The Enterprise, in particular, the aircraft carrier and its retinue of ships. So, at the same time, the United States is still trying to recover from the shock, particularly the shock here to its military establishment, the center of its military activity, the Pentagon. Military plans are very slowly developing when it comes time for retaliation. John?
Bob Franken, thanks very much. A fourth hijacked plane crashed in a rural area of Pennsylvania. The United Airlines Boeing 757 was headed from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco with 45 people on board when it went down. Intelligence sources say they believe the intended destination was another government target, possibly Camp David, the presidential retreat. There was some speculation that the plane was shot down, but the military denies it. Local emergency officials say a man who identified himself as a passenger on the flight called by cell phone just 10 minutes before the plane crashed. That was how authorities learned the plane had been hijacked.
In a 5-minute address to the nation, a grim-faced President George W. Bush said the United States would make no distinction between terrorists and those who harbor them. The president said thousands of lives were claimed by the, quote, evil, despicable act of terror, end of quote. He branded the attacks, quote, mass murder, and said those responsible would be hunted down.
These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve.
American forces overseas have been put on high alert. The U.S. European Command in Germany says it is taking steps to ensure the security of the troops and their families. For more, we're joined by our correspondent Tom Bogdanovich at the U.S. base in Ramstein, Germany. Tom.
Good morning. Well, let me first tell you about what's going on at the German equivalent of the World Trade Center. That was evacuated this morning after a bomb threat. 4,000 people work in that very tall tower. But I understand that has been calmed down. Everybody is back at work. So that's the German Messeturm. The motor show, which is taking place in Frankfurt here, that is going on as normal, although all parties and that sort of thing have been cancelled. It's a very subdued show. I'm standing right outside the Frankfurt Air Base, the Rhein-Main Air Base. This is at maximum security alert. We saw that the soldiers were checking for the Air Force were checking every single car going in there. Engines were being examined, mirrors were being used, dogs were being used. Where we're standing now is the nearest that we're allowed to go to the base at present. We're not allowed to stand in front of the front gate. This base is not actually an active base. There are no planes here. It was due to be closed down in 1995, but it was kept going because of the Kosovo crisis. This airbase is actually right next to the Frankfurt airport, so it can take very large planes. There's a runway here, and it can take large cargo planes. If there were to be any operations in Europe, then this base would definitely be used because it can take those planes. So this base could be active again. In terms of what the German government is doing, we've just been hearing from Chancellor Gerhard Schröder. He's expressed his solidarity with America. He's described the act as a declaration of war against civilization, and he's announced that there'll be a 5-minute silence at 10 o'clock on Thursday, and all workers and executives will participate in that. There's a memorial service today with all faiths. That's at St. Hedwig's Cathedral in Berlin. Back to you in Atlanta.
Tom, thank you. John?
The editor of an Arabic-language newspaper published in London says he received a warning 3 weeks ago. He believes the warning came from Islamic fundamentalists close to suspected terrorist mastermind Osama bin Laden. The warning was a huge and unprecedented attack, but it offered no specifics. The editor says there are several groups capable of such an operation.
It could be a work of consortium of many organizations, Islamic organizations, which they declared war against the United States. You know, the anti-American feeling is very high now in the Middle East and the Muslim world because what's happening on the occupied territories, and many people accuse the United States of actually helping the Israeli and protecting them. So the groups like Bin Laden and other Islamic fundamentalists, actually, they would like to come out and say, look, you know, we are targeting the United States. The United States is supporting the Muslim and Arab enemies, which is the Israeli, and we are taking revenge of what's happening. So we learned from sources that, you know, they are really at work to hit American target. But nobody expected that this target will be in New York itself or in the Pentagon. So the place of the attacks was surprising to everybody.
Afghanistan's ruling Taliban are harboring bin Laden. Only hours after the attack, several explosions rocked the perimeter of Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. The United States said it had nothing to do with the Afghan explosions. The Taliban opposition first denied and then claimed responsibility for them. CNN correspondent Nick Robertson is in Kabul to help us sort it out. Nick, what's going on there?
Well, Jonathan, a few hours after those explosions, we were in touch with the Northern Alliance, that is a group of fighters and political leaders controlling the last 5% of Afghanistan the Taliban have yet to gain control of. They told us that they were responsible for those attacks, and shortly after that confirmation, Taliban officials, ministerial officials, also told us that the city had been attacked by the Northern Alliance. They said they were attacked by helicopters firing missiles. Certainly we could see the missiles flying across the city. Certainly we could see an ammunition dump on fire, and also hear aircraft in the air. Taliban officials also tell us today that 2 aircraft and workshop facilities at Kabul airport were damaged. 2 Antonov aircraft, one the national airline Ariana and one a military aircraft were damaged on the airfield. But certainly from here in Afghanistan, what happened last night in Kabul was part of an ongoing civil war, spurred on by the fact that a key leader in the north was the subject of an assassination attempt over the weekend. Very unclear if he's still alive. This morning in Kabul, United Nations aid workers have been preparing to leave. They're being reduced to a skeleton staff here, and workers from other international charity organizations, non-governmental charity organizations, have been preparing to leave. Of 10 German groups in the city, we understand that 4 are leaving today, and certainly some of them we've already seen today driving out of their compounds and leaving the city. Taliban, of course, Jonathan, very swift to move in this situation and say that bin Laden was not responsible and that Afghanistan condemns terrorism. A certain amount of apprehension here in the leadership circles about what could happen in the coming days and weeks. And the Taliban very swift to put their stamp of what happened, the responsibility here, very clearly that they are not responsible, they say. Equally, they say they believe bin Laden not responsible as well, Jonathan.
Nick, many people in the United States are calling this an act of war, though they're not naming the enemy who presumably carried it out. Does Afghanistan, does the leadership there feel like it's being drawn into a war? Are they preparing for one?
Well, when asked about that last night, Taliban Foreign Minister Wakil Ahmed Mutawakil was clear. He said that Afghanistan had not been directly accused yet, and he said that it was not necessary for Afghanistan to take any precautions, such as to go on a heightened state of security alert, secure airfields and other such areas. He said that wasn't necessary at this time. Afghanistan and bin Laden, he said, had not been accused openly. However, they are very concerned about the situation right now, Jonathan.
Nick Robertson in Kabul, thanks very much. Relita?
John, for more analysis now, we're joined by Magnus Ranstorp, who's the Deputy Director of the Center for the Study of Terrorism and Political Violence at St. Andrews University. Mr. Ranstorp, thank you very much for joining us. Your thoughts on who could have carried out these attacks?
Well, it's perhaps too early to say right now who would be responsible for the attacks. It could be a combination of a consortium of groups. It could be possibly state involvement. But I think most of the money, most of the attention is focused on bin Laden. Perhaps not him personally, but many of his lieutenants and his network of followers that are distributed all around the world. His organization is truly a multinational enterprise with not only followers from many different nationalities, but also have financial infrastructure all around the world. And there has been a massive intelligence-led effort ever since 1996, when he declared an open war against America, to try to track down not only him and his followers, but also his financial assets.
Where did intelligence fail in this case?
The organization, given the fact that they have fought the Soviet, or members of the organization have fought the Soviet Union for over a decade, they are well skilled in guerrilla techniques and in terrorism techniques. They understand how the West gathers intelligence. They have therefore avoided signals intelligence in terms of using satellite phones and so forth that figured previously in some of the information we have about bin Laden himself. The United States and other intelligence agencies have a great difficulty, given the decentralized nature of the organization, in being able to infiltrate it. Many of the followers we are unaware of in terms of their nationality, and therefore most governments, most intelligence agencies do not have lists of these operatives. However, there are certain nationalities that have figured at the top end of the core of bin Laden's and Al-Qaeda as an organization. Those being principally Egyptian, but also Algerian, particularly following Al-Qaeda's ability to infiltrate the armed Islamic group in Algeria in 1997-98 and set up an infrastructure in Europe.
You're certainly pointing out to the complexities of the post-Cold War era, where it is very difficult to pinpoint terrorist attacks.
Yes, it's very difficult because you have individuals, groups that can overcome asymmetry of power using very conventional, yet, as we have witnessed yesterday, through very conventional means, simple means, cause catastrophic mass casualty events.
Mr.
Ranstorp. And we are...
Yes, finish your thought.
And we have been facing a new kind of terrorism, a faceless enemy that does not claim any credit anymore, that is interested in retribution, that is interested in mobilizing forces against the dominance of the West and the United States in particular. And in particular, vis-à-vis bin Laden, over the issue of continued U.S. presence in the Gulf. He have advocated and mobilized and tried to use the issue of Jerusalem as a cause to get more popularity. And of course, the Iraqi population suffering under the sanctions.
Mr. Renstrup, thank you very much for speaking with us. John.
U.S. financial markets, including the New York Stock Exchange and the Nasdaq, will remain closed Wednesday. In Asia, markets fell decisively right from the open. Richard Quest has the latest now on Asia and European trading as well. Richard?
Yes, indeed, Jonathan. The markets in Asia pretty much followed the trend that had been seen in Europe. Of course, there was no trading in the United States on Tuesday, so it was really left to Europe and to Asia to give the financial world's reaction to what was being seen. There were very sharp reduction in values. Tokyo was off some 6%. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index down 8%. At the moment, we're seeing something of a turnaround. We'll get to that in a second. Across the financial world, central bankers have been trying to talk confidence into the market. The Bank of Japan, the European Central Bank, the US Fed, they've all said that they stand ready to add cash, to add so-called liquidity to the market. That can be in the provision of cash to ATMs for people withdrawing money out of panic, or to companies who are suddenly finding themselves in a credit crunch. OPEC has said it also stands by to provide greater supplies of oil in the event that prices should exceed supply. That would be, of course, very bad for the world economy, and there had been fears that the rise in price which you saw in the last 24 hours would continue. It doesn't seem to be at the moment. Overall, all financial agencies, all central banks are aiming to build confidence in the world business system, as Bob Hormats, the vice chairman of Goldman Sachs, explained.
G7 particularly have to work together to restore confidence by showing that they're working together on this. It's not just one country, it's the overall financial world that needs to have confidence restored, and the G7 leaders need to do that together.
And to that end, they will take whatever measures they deem necessary, cutting interest rates, providing money to the markets. The European markets are open. We'll now catch up with what's been happening. Liz George is at the London Stock Exchange with an update. Liz George.
Richard, thanks very much indeed. It's extremely sombre here in the city. In fact, there's an eerie quietness. Normally, on a morning at this particular time in the morning, you see the streets very packed, commuters coming into work. Today, the streets are extremely quiet. There's hardly any traffic around, just a few people walking into work. And one of the most extraordinary things, of course, as well, is that there's not even any aircraft noise. Now, the city is normally in the flight path, and of course, there are no aircraft coming across either. So there's an awful lot of quietness. A very, very sombre feeling here. The links between the financial markets here in London and the financial markets in New York are extremely strong. And traders, investors, people in the city really thinking very hard about their colleagues, their co-workers, their friends in New York that perhaps are missing, that they haven't heard from. So there really is a great deal of quietness, and that's pervading onto the trading floors as well. Extremely sombre, very light trading. People really waiting to see what's going to happen. Trading rooms extremely empty today. I was talking to one analyst earlier on, Jeremy Batson of NatWest Stockbrokers, about the mood yesterday when this news actually broke across the trading floors. And he was saying there was a huge feeling of panic, just a gut reaction, a massive amount of selling going on. But he was saying that as people begin to take time to think about it, then the markets are going to come back slightly. And that's what we've seen them doing today as people just digest this mood. So the markets at the moment are rising slightly, but they've been wavering all over the place. Now let's go to Maggie Lake in our New York bureau.
Liz, hi there. As you can imagine, everyone here is still reeling from the news today. We won't find out how markets react. All financial markets are closed in the United States. For many companies, their first concern, especially for those in New York and the lower part of Manhattan, are making sure that all their employees are accounted for. We've seen some companies running banners on the news stations across the bottom asking their employees to call numbers to make sure that they get a final head count. You know, personal safety is going to be the first concern here. There are a lot of worries about what this will do to consumer confidence. We were already having many fears about whether the U.S. economy was facing recession. This type of unprecedented action here in the United States, we're just not clear what kind of impact this will have on consumer confidence at a very fragile time. We'll have to wait some days before that is evident. We will not have stocks trading in the U.S. tomorrow. We also understand that Instinet is not trading U.S. stocks in Europe until we're able to come out of this. One of the big focuses when we are up and running again, of course, will be the insurers, as is often the case here with so much damage and loss of life. There are two areas really of insurance that are going to be covered, which is liability and property. And some of the last time, you know, it's eerie. We have been through this before at the World Trade Center. Many of the people coming out saying this is round two for them, and hopefully the last time out, insurers paid $510 million in damages in the wake of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. They're a big focus. I know that they're suffering losses abroad in both Asia and Europe in terms of insurers. Some of the companies last time that were affected: American International, Hartford Services, Cigna, which sold its U.S. property insurance to the Bermuda insurer ACE, and Lloyd's of London. Of course, we do not know if they are the companies that will again be facing liabilities on this side. We have had a statement from Chubb already, but we are going to have to wait until we can sift through them. You know, as I said, a lot of these companies at least have some satellite offices, even if they're not these insurance companies. Others that are involved in life have satellite companies down there. We understand that Paul O'Neill, the Treasury Secretary, is making his way back to the U.S. Obviously, as Richard mentioned, the Fed has come out and said they will provide the liquidity needed to keep the markets moving. So still a sense of shock here, but hopefully things will slowly get back to business. I also should mention that a lot of employers will keep their people home tomorrow and not bring them into Manhattan. So we're going to slowly grind forward here. Liz? Actually, I think we're going to Jonathan Mann, perhaps. Jonathan?
Maggie Lake, thanks very much. There is enormous uncertainty now. The money is one thing, but the center of everyone's concern, of course, the people. It could be weeks before the fate of all those who are in or near the World Trade Center is known. Michael Holmes has more.
Even in the chaos of the aftermath, it was clear the casualty list would be obscenely long.
You don't want to know. You don't want to know. You don't want to know the things that we are stepping over. It was horrific, absolutely horrific.
Survivors, the walking wounded, and those who were just passing by the World Trade Center, ghost-like, covered in dust and ash and disbelief.
If you go over by there, you can see the people jumping out the window. They're jumping out the window right now. Oh, my God.
Everybody was on top of each other trying to come down, and then somebody finally calmed the crowd down to get them to come down the stairs in an orderly fashion and get them out of the building.
The dust was everywhere, blanketing entire city blocks, an eerie war zone scene, stunned survivors being guided to buses or simply walking silently away from the scene. Emergency workers did their jobs.
Why don't we just set this up as a little mobile hospital unit right here, okay?
Witnesses spoke of how eerily calm the survivors, even the injured, appeared to be. People ran, but there was little hysteria. The buildings housed thousands of workers. Thousands more visited each day. It will be days, maybe weeks, before the number of dead is known. It could be in the thousands. It all depends on how many of those 10,000 workers managed to evacuate before the buildings collapsed. The injured are easier to count, and they too number in the thousands. There are 170 hospitals in the New York area, and all were on maximum alert, many swamped with casualties. Injuries ranging from shock and asthma attacks brought on by that dust, through to broken bones and severe head injuries. And then there were the burns. Hundreds of people burned from head to toe, said one doctor. Here, another on what he saw.
There was one, a burn patient. I mean, it's very difficult to see burn patients. They're charred. They're charred. Their skin is coming off. They're in tremendous pain, and you know, it's tremendous suffering.
Officials were worried about blood supplies, but as soon as that became known, hundreds of New Yorkers lined up to donate, as did Americans across the country, jamming donation centres. Disaster relief agencies working with the military to transport thousands of pints of blood to New York City and to Washington, where survivors of the Pentagon attack were also in need. Among the dead and injured in New York, hundreds of firefighters, rescue workers, police officers, people who'd gone to the scene after the first plane crashed into the Twin Towers to help the injured and evacuate the survivors. They were inside when the buildings collapsed. And at last count, more than half of the 400 firefighters who went to the scene never reported back. Michael Holmes, CNN.
Assuming they got any sleep overnight, Americans will be waking up this day to headlines that will probably still seem very unreal. In some ways, this might be seen as the day the 21st century really began for the American people. Back now to New York, and once again, our Garrick Utley.
Well, really, it's speaking of headlines, we've just got the first edition of one New York newspaper. It's the New York Post. As you can see here, act of war is on the front page. Get it right there. World Trade Center bombed, and there's a picture, a still photo of that one plane heading into one of the World Trade Center towers. We're still waiting for the New York Daily News and the New York Times. They're having trouble getting their papers in, as the Post did, from across the rivers where the printing plants are located, because the bridges and the tunnels have been closed. Today we see many of these images, and yet things that were not captured on videotape can also be very telling and very important. For example, early this evening I experienced two or three things. The skies were quiet over Manhattan after the explosions occurred, because air traffic, of course, had been grounded. Until about 7 o'clock this evening, and suddenly I was outside and I heard a noise, a strange noise. It was a U.S. Air Force fighter plane flying over Manhattan. One fighter, rather high, streaking across this city. Never heard that before here. A few minutes later, trying to get transportation. There are no taxis in town, very few buses or subways running. At the edge of Central Park, where tourists love to come, there is one of those horse-drawn carriages, the hansom cabs. Just one, a horse, the carriage, and its rider, its driver, looking for fares, alone in an empty street at Central Park South. But there were no customers out on the streets this evening. Finally, you find a bus, get on a New York City bus, and guess what? No charge. Everybody rides free these days and these nights in Manhattan. Those are some of the little things that aren't recorded on videotape, and here now are some of the pictures we've really been seeing over these past several hours. Let's go to them once again. We saw this extraordinary sight, the Exodus. We really can't call it anything more than that. People leaving Manhattan this afternoon. Maybe you've seen these scenes before. In Lower Manhattan, the Brooklyn Bridge, famous to so many people. Just look at that. And look how orderly everyone is. Concern, anxiety, certainly, but order. No panic here. Amazing in view of what had just happened a few minutes before, after the planes struck the building. It comes down. Only 31 years old, the World Trade Center towers, and down they came. Down they came after the fire in the towers reached 1,500 or 1,600 degrees or even more. That melted the steel. As it melted the steel, shell or frame, the floors collapsed, each on the other, and down they came into rubble. And amid this, the chaos, understandable chaos, confusion, fear, fleeing, the pure, basic human instinct of self-preservation. And yet, even in these scenes, again and again, the reports of how many individuals helped each other, helped pull them along, their friends, their colleagues. And tonight, the rescue efforts continue. Heavy machinery as well as floodlights, runoff portable generators have been brought in. There are up to 10,000 rescue workers in Manhattan, working day and night. Still no estimates as to what the casualties will be in the World Trade Center bombings, but the work continues. It has only begun. Which also raises another question. a question that New Yorkers will be asking as they get up this morning, and perhaps people across the nation will be asking too. Was this it? Is it now over? As horrendous as it was the taking down of the two towers here, the bombing of the Pentagon, the bombing of the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. Is that the end of this terrorist attack by whomever organized it? Or could there be more attacks? We don't know. We don't want to raise any undue concern. But the fact that New York City security officials and federal officials, security officials, are saying keep the bridges and the tunnels closed tomorrow, keep the airports closed, keep the planes grounded, means they are obviously very concerned that there may still be another attack out there, some terrorist out there. Earlier this evening, bomb squads could be seen racing through the city, checking out every suspicious vehicle. They don't know, the security people, we don't know. And of course, we'll never know until it happens again, if it does. Relitza?
Garrick, certainly there is a massive loss of a sense of security that Americans will have after this event.
Certainly, there's no question about this. This is, as has been said many times today, the single most traumatic direct attack on American territory and lives since December 7th, 1941. And this, too, will be a day that will last much for many, many years in infamy. And yet, I think Americans are not totally surprised by this. Shocked, yes. Surprised, no. We understand the world today. We understand the dangers. We see what happens in the Middle East. We understand the terrorists in Afghanistan and elsewhere in this world. We see it via satellite all the time. We see it in the news. And so this scene is a reminder that, yes, it could happen again. It is, as somebody also observed, looking at these documents, these memos, these expense accounts, the letters that floated down from the World Trade Center towers. Whatever the high-tech age has brought us, we are not yet a paperless society.
Garrick.
So much invested in those papers and those lives and in those jobs. Yes, Relitza.
Garrick, thank you very much.
Back to you.
Many nations around the world are more familiar with terrorism than the United States had been, but still the reaction elsewhere has been enormous shock. CNN's Christiane Amanpour joins us from London. Christiane?
Jonathan, indeed, the day after, the sense of shock and naked fear is growing, not diminishing. Here, the normally staid British newspapers, the broadsheets, are using headlines like Doomsday America. The cerebral Financial Times has got a massive front page which says assault on America. And even the Figaro in France saying the new war. The sense here is that this is an act of unparalleled barbarism. It is not just the biggest single act of terrorism on U.S. soil, but according to everybody I've asked, this is the single biggest recorded act of terrorism in our memory. We can't think of anywhere that something like this has happened, as far as we can see, way back even in 50 years. The British cabinet is meeting in emergency security session today. The Prime Minister has gathered his Home Secretary, otherwise known as the Interior Minister, his Foreign and Defence Secretaries. They have issued statements, certainly last night, the British Prime Minister saying that all democracies and all the world must now unite, not only to defeat, but to eradicate this act of barbarism and these kinds of movements that create this kind of upheaval and disaster and calamity. The French President Jacques Chirac called this an attack on freedom itself. The German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder called it an attack on the entire civilized world. Presidents across Europe, from Russia to Italy to France to Germany, are all saying that the world, the democracies, must stand firm, not only offering moral support and sympathy to the United States, but a new resolve to combat this kind of naked aggression, they're saying. In the Arab world, all the moderate Arab leaders, most of whom are allies of the United States, have condemned this. Even Libya, which has its history of antagonism with the United States, has condemned this attack and has sent sympathy to the United States. The only country not doing so is Iraq, which, as we know, is in current state of ongoing war with the United States and, in fact, the United Kingdom. Here in Britain, there has been heightened security, not only at the airports where I flew in today, where there are policemen with submachine guns at the entrances to the airport. There are no planes allowed to fly over central London, but also in other areas of government buildings, there is a heightened state of alert, as there are in many other capitals. It is increasingly jittery. We've heard stories and reports of hoaxes, fake bomb alerts, people being told they had to evacuate a building in Frankfurt only to discover that this, in fact, was not a real attack. And indeed, Downing Street, the Prime Minister's residence here in Britain, was evacuated of all the journalists shortly before their national security meeting, and no reason was given for that. But a state of shock settling in here and around the world, Jonathan.
Christian Amanpour, thanks very much. Relita?
Now, for more in the mood in Paris, we're joined by Jim Bitterman. Jim.
Yes, Relita, good morning. The news here has been dominated, of course, by the attack this morning. One of France's leading commentators said that we are entering a new world here this morning, a world which will be dominated between the conflict, will be dominated by the conflict between radical Islam and the West. And he said that September 11th will mark a pivotal date between the before and after that conflict. Afterwards, of course, there was swift reaction on the streets here in Paris.
Within hours of the attack in New York, the American embassy in Paris was closed and evacuated. The employees told to go home. It remains closed this morning, and there's no sign of when it might open again. At American institutions around town, there is much tighter security this morning. Most remain open. But American flags have been withdrawn from outside the buildings in case anyone should want to try another attack. At the American Cathedral, a service is scheduled for later on today.
Sont une épouvantable tragédie.
President Jacques Chirac went on television last night to call the American attacks a terrible tragedy. And he ordered a top security alert, which will mobilize thousands of French troops and put them on the streets of Paris. But so far this morning, there is little sign of any military activity, and it's not clear that there has been any specific threat to the country. Nonetheless, French on the street this morning were nervous about what happened in New York and feeling very vulnerable, even here.
Oh, we don't feel in security nowhere now.
You don't feel secure anywhere?
Nobody is safe in his own country, and this is awful, I think.
There's a special meeting of France's anti-terrorism committee going on right now. Once again, the Interior Minister has emphasized that there is no specific threat against France. One leading newspaper here, as many have, compared the attack in New York to Pearl Harbor, but it took it one step further, saying that, like the attack on Pearl Harbor, perhaps the attack on New York will bring the United States out of its isolationism. Relita?
Jim, what kind of offers for help to the U.S. are being contemplated?
The French have offered to do anything they can to help in this situation. I think they have sent some special teams to help look for victims in the rubble. But basically, there's not a whole lot they can do from here. They have canceled, by the way, I should have probably mentioned, they've canceled all further Air France flights today to the United States, just as a precautionary measure. So we're seeing that kind of global shutdown of the airlines that we saw yesterday afternoon. It looks like it's going to take place at least through part of the day today. Relita?
Jim, thank you. John?
Beyond France, the European Union as a whole is trying to make its voice and concern known. Diana Muriel joins us now with the latest from a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels. Diana?
That's right, John. In fact, there's a series of emergency meetings taking place here in Brussels. Right now, the European Commission is holding an emergency session. We'll be hearing more from them in a press conference in approximately an hour and a quarter, where Romano Prodi, the head of the European Commission, is likely to make some remarks, as well as Chris Patton, who's the Commissioner for External Relations. As you said, the European Union foreign ministers will also be holding a meeting this afternoon here in Brussels, and we'll be hearing more from them later. And NATO, which has cancelled a meeting in Budapest, the chiefs of NATO returning to Brussels. They'll be holding their own meeting later, and again a press conference. In fact, the Permanent Security Council of NATO is currently in its second meeting of the day, in coordination with the US authorities coordinating security measures here in Europe. At the same time, the response here in Brussels is one of absolute shock. In fact, the Belgian authorities have provided a team of 5 medical officers who are specialists in burns from the burns unit of the major hospital here in Brussels. We understand that they will be sent to America in response to American requests for assistance, as well as 5 police officers from the federal police here who are specialists in identifying corpses. The airport in Brussels is at a state of high security. There is a lot of disruption to flights around the region. Of course, there are no flights to the US, to Canada, or indeed to Israel today. But the security measures will continue until further notice. We understand that no flights will be going to the US until approximately midday Washington time. But of course, that has to be confirmed. Back to you, John.
Diana Muriel, thanks very much.
And it has been an unbelievable and tragic 21 hours here in the United States today. Here are now some of the most enduring images that were caught on camera.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
The plane was coming in. I noticed it a second before it hit the building. It looked like it was moving slowly, and it lined itself up to hit the building directly.
The doorman goes to me, wow, I never seen a plane flying so low. And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even real.
I'd say the whole takes about, looks like 6, 7 floors were taken out. And there's more explosions right now. Hold on, people are running.
Listen, hold on just a moment. We got an explosion inside.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on.
It just went ba-boom. It was like a bomb went off. And it was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, they were coming out on the mezzanine level there, and another explosion came right from it, just everything went flying right in front of me. Everything just went boom.
There's a huge crowd, I'd say about hundreds of people on the streets that come from south to north. I've been really thousands of people that have been running from inside these buildings. You know, it's a very heavily trafficked area in downtown, the World Trade Center. Many of them were inside the building when they felt the explosion. And they say there was just pandemonium. There was no warning, no alarms, no anything. Everyone just raced from their desks.
There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
They started slowly evacuating the White House about 30 minutes ago, and then in the last 5 minutes, people have come running out of the White House and the old executive office building.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
Well, arriving at the Pentagon a short time ago, there was a huge plume of smoke which continues to rise from the west side of the Pentagon. The plume of smoke is enormous. It's a couple of 100 yards across. At its base, it is billowing into the sky.
There is a lot of confusion here at the Pentagon. It appears that something hit
the Pentagon on the outside of the 5th corridor, on the Army corridor. Several Army officers I talked to reported hearing a big explosion, seeing shards of metal coming past their window. The Pentagon has been evacuated. Emergency services personnel were rushing to reports of several people trapped in the building. Most of the building's 24,000 people are outside of the building or in the center courtyard.
The White House is reporting that the Capitol building has been evacuated and the Treasury Department has been evacuated. Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, is exceptionally tense and clearly taking steps as if it is virtually under siege here.
There has just been a huge explosion. We can see a billowing smoke rising, and I'll tell you that I can't see that second tower, but there was a cascade of sparks and fire, and now it looks almost like a mushroom cloud explosion, this huge billowing smoke in the second tower.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help. I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot? I'm seeing a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Oh, wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you?
Don't have oxygen.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks. They told me just to wait here at this semi-staging area. See if I can help, so that's what I'm doing. They won't let me go any closer. No one can go in to get the people out. There's small explosions still going on. So far, I've seen some people who needed oxygen from the dust. No one trauma. Gonna go wash my eyes out. Did we just heard another explosion? They're handing out gloves and masks. The consensus is it's too unsafe to go in there.
What are we doing?
You know what?
Anything?
Why don't we just set this up as a little mobile hospital unit right here, okay?
Battalion gets all units that are available. We're having a new command post on Murray Street and West Street. Any units available, respond when you're all up here.
We have a report now that a large plane crashed this morning north of the Somerset County Airport, which is in western Pennsylvania, not too terribly far from Pittsburgh, about 80 miles or so.
I don't think there are enough words